Hi, my name is Andy, and this video is going to be me pretty much just talking through some of the things I feel I need to talk through and maybe giving y'all some insight to what the disorder is and getting a glimpse inside the mind and the thought processes someone with this disorder struggles with every day, because it's really the thought processes that I struggle with. And I've gotten to a point where I'm self-aware enough that I can talk about it now and be like, yeah, I know this is wrong and I need to fix it. But it took me a long time to get there. It took me a long time to pinpoint and put my finger on, well, there's something off. I don't know what it is. I'm doing everything I believe is right and correct. I've pushed myself to the hardest point. I'm still having the same troubles I've always had. So, without to get too into it, basically, I'll say that I was first diagnosed with borderline personality disorder 2 years ago, officially. And it came as a surprise to me. At first, I thought the therapist was one of those therapists that just kind of threw around diagnoses and just like, you have this, for lack of a better term, like instead of just calling me crazy, she was like, you know what, you have this. But no, she was actually the most intelligent, thoughtful therapist I've ever experienced, and she really thought through that, and it changed my life. That diagnosis changed my life because now I kind of have more of a blueprint to learn about myself, and it's good to have something to go off of. Like, okay, I have this, I can do this to fix it. And when you don't know what you have, and you're just going, I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know why I can't have these relationships with people, or why my jobs keep falling through, or I can't really function in society that well. It's good to have something for me, not for anybody else, as like an excuse, but for me to say to myself, not to anybody else, but to myself, I know I have this and I know I can do this to fix it. When you have a solution at your fingertips, it feels so much better rather than, the years I've spent thinking that there's something wrong with me and I was born like unfixable or something. So, I'm referring to borderline personality disorder, and what I want to do is kind of explain the first signs of it, and then like my experience and what I'm going through right now and why I decided to make this video. So, if you're interested in watching and hearing about it, I really appreciate you even taking the time to listen, because these are things that people don't want to talk about. There's so much stigma, and especially with borderline, there's a stigma within the stigma within the stigma within the stigma. Because I've been denied therapists. I've gone to the first session and then I told them what my diagnosis was, and they're like, "Oh, well, that I don't treat that. Like I'm not qualified to treat that. I don't do DBT, which is dialectical behavior therapy, which is very helpful and has helped me, but not, and it's specifically made for people with borderline personality disorder, um, but not many therapists actually practice it. It's been very difficult for me to find someone that specifically treated and practiced it with DBT and treated borderline. So I've actually been denied by therapists, and not even just that they couldn't treat it, but that they really didn't want to take the time and make the effort to understand it, because it's too complex and too complicated, and there's too much to it. They just want to let me write you a prescription for depression and off you go, because that's simple. I'm not trying to say depression is simple at all. I'm just saying that in the grand scheme of things, doctors are so used to just writing a script and saying bye, which is not even right for depression, because it's so much more complex than that, and they don't even realize it. But with borderline, you can't do that, because it's all in your thought processes. It's all in how you relate to people. A medication can't cure you. A medication can't just, magically snap and you know how to relate to people and act normal. So, anyways, I want to go back to when my family first started like noticing something was off with me, and give those examples so that there's kind of like a background to show like where I came from. And so anyways, so the first time that I ever like my mom and dad ever noticed that there was something a little off to me was whenever I started excessively washing my hands to the point where my hands were bleeding and cracking and I could barely move them. So they obviously were very concerned because they didn't know why I was washing my hands so much. I also had other rituals that they began to notice, like when I was turning the light switch off, I would press it down so hard to make sure it was off good enough that it would eventually make the light switch loose. I ended up breaking 2 sinks, I believe. The we had just the handles on the sink that you kind of just push back, not the ones that go like that, but the push back ones. And in my bathroom, I would push it really hard, and that wasn't enough. I would keep pushing and pushing and pushing because it wasn't turned off good enough. And in my mind, I was just thinking, well, if it's not turned off good enough, it's gonna leak the whole night. Blah 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 blah. But keep in mind, I was 4 and 5. I was really young when I was doing this, so I barely remember it. But then these continued as I got older too. They never really went away. But it got so severe when I was around 4 or 5 that my mom decided to take me to I believe that it was a behavior therapist for children. And I'm not sure if they diagnosed me with anything. I never really got more information on that visit, but I believe that they tossed around the idea of OCD. So that was kind of the first experience with mental illness for me. Then the next time was when I was around 11 or 12. My OCD was still pretty bad. I mean, I was still breaking sinks and stuff like that. That's just an example, but that's one of many. And so my mom was like, you know what, you're 12 now. And 12 is the age where you can, the age when doctors will start prescribing medication, like antidepressants. So my mom took me to her general doctor, and he listened to my symptoms, everything, and I think he formally diagnosed me with OCD, but he also diagnosed me with depression. And so he put me on my first antidepressant, and I was 12. So about that time was when I was actually really struggling because I was developing and, on top of all the mental stuff I was going through, you got the hormones and shit. So, I was diagnosed with anorexia a couple years later. Actually, no, it was about a year and a half later when I was 13, 14 in there. And anorexia kind of takes a long time to really get to a point where you're put in a hospital, especially if it's not as noticeable. And for me, it wasn't as noticeable because I'm really short. I'm 4'11", and so I didn't just look like skin and bones. Like you couldn't just look at me and say, "Oh, she's anorexic." No, it wasn't as obvious, so it was kind of harder for my parents to recognize it sooner. So I mean, eventually they took me to my primary care doctor when I was like barely eating at all, and it actually took a long time for them to diagnose me or do anything about it. They just thought I was picky or something. But eventually my primary care doctor told my parents that they'd have to take me to the emergency room because if it went on any longer, there was a possibility that my heart could stop pumping because it was so weak. So they ended up taking me to the emergency room. That was when I was diagnosed with anorexia officially. They admitted me into the ER, made sure my heart was okay, gave me a heart echo, which is kind of like a sonogram for your heart. Like when they do on pregnant women, but for your heart, to take a look at it, make sure it's okay. They didn't have to put me on the cardiology floor. They ended up putting me in a children's psychiatric unit. And so I was in there for 2 months, got treatment for anorexia, but for the most part, I did attend the therapies, stuff like that. For the most part, I spent my time eating. Them forcing me, threatening me with feeding tubes, and if I didn't eat, I'd have to get this feeding tube. So really all I did, oh, hi, kitty. Really all that happened was I gained weight. I gained about 12 pounds after being in the inpatient unit, and when they discharged me, my anorexia was nowhere near gone. So that was when I was around 13, and I wouldn't say that it I recovered from the mindset of anorexia until I was around 17, which is that's pretty good. That's pretty early to recover from anorexia, because I know a lot of anorexia patients that it took a lot longer and they're still struggling with it to this day. And I fortunately am not. So I was able to recover from the mindset, because it is a mindset. It's not a choice you make. It's something you fall into. And once you reach that slope, like here's the anorexia slope. Once you reach that slope, it's a slippery slope. If you start falling down that slope, you're going to fall all the way to the bottom. And it's so hard to get back up. And it's the mindset I'm talking about. It's not even just the physical weight loss. It's the mindset, because it's almost like an addiction, because once your body gets that feeling of, oh, I lost this weight, and I'm seeing this number on the scale, and I see this, you're getting that, I guess, instant gratification from a number or something, and it's addictive, and you have to keep feeling it. So every time I would tell myself, okay, I want to be, let's say I was 110. Okay, I want to be 105. A little bit later, okay, I want to be 100. 100 is not good enough. I want to be 95. Oh, no, 95 is not good enough. I need to be 93, and I will be happy. And I kept telling myself that, like, I would come up with numbers, and I was like, oh, I will be happy at this number. But it got to a point where, I mean, you're never happy. Like I said, it's a slippery slope, and once it starts, it's extremely hard to stop, because your mindset just gets addicted to feeling like this is not enough. I need more. I need to lose more weight. And you're not making this choice. It's completely subconscious, because I wasn't even aware that I had an issue or that I was abnormal, that I was 79 pounds. I didn't understand that that was an issue. I didn't understand that eating 3 lima beans a day, and I'm not kidding, was not normal. And it really messes with your brain. And so that's what frustrates me when people talk about anorexia, is they don't fully understand that it's a mindset, and you don't ever choose to be put in that mindset. I strongly believe that, yes, all these mental illnesses can be genetic, and I do believe I have some genetics that predisposed me to these illnesses. But I would say that anorexia and borderline, specifically those two, because depression is really, in my opinion, really linked to genetics, which I do have as well. So, but borderline and anorexia, I feel, in my personal opinion, this is not for everybody, but in my personal opinion, I feel like they are strongly influenced by your experiences when you're younger, and they're also linked to the emotional bond with the people you had when you were younger, and the type of, just the way you were raised. And I'm not saying that my parents did a bad job. I think it's just when you have this sort of mindset, and you need to be loved this way, and maybe your parents don't know you need to be loved this way, so you're not exactly being loved the way that you need to be deep down. And I think over time that you learn your responses to things, and you learn, oh, I'm in trouble when I do this. Oh, and that means I'm bad, and that means I'm just a bad person, and that, I don't deserve to be here, and I should punish myself. And it just keeps going and going and going. It's like, it's another slippery slope. Like, once you start with the thought process of you did something wrong, instead of like being like any other person that doesn't really struggle with this, instead of being just like, oh, I did something wrong, okay, well, I won't do that next time, oops. It's more like, oh, I did this wrong, my family's gonna hate me, I'm good for nothing, I'm a waste of space, I'm a burden, I waste the air, I'm too big, like I take up too much space, things like that. And then you get to a point where you're just like, I'm worthless. And that's the thought process someone specifically with borderline, at least me, I believe it's very common with other borderlines as well, kind of develops, but it happens like super early on. And these things happen when you're a child, and your parents and you don't even know that you're forming all these thought processes. So I feel like that forms a lot of what will happen later, which could be an eating disorder or borderline personality disorder, based on your experiences and the thought processes you formed as a child. So the reason I wanted to give the backstory with what else I was diagnosed with was because I believe that all of it has to do with the same thing. I believe that a psychiatrist can sit me down and say, well, you have this, 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 this. I'm like, okay, but they're all related. They're all related to each other. And I feel like the reason this video and the reason I firmly believe that my primary issue is borderline personality disorder. This video I'm making is about borderline personality disorder, but I want to include the depression, the anxiety, the anorexia, all of that, because I believe it stemmed from that. Even the OCD. I was misdiagnosed with both bipolar disorder and PTSD, and that was a couple years before I got formally diagnosed with borderline. And it's very dangerous because with someone with bipolar disorder, which is a very real thing, it's a very real chemical imbalance, they prescribe very heavy psychiatric medications, such as antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, anticonvulsants, like all these things that they're very heavy. I mean, they carry a lot of side effects. They can really alter your mental state. Yet doctors are just kind of writing scripts for them like it's whatever. Just take this. Oh, you don't have stable moods. Like one time you're down here, and then another day you're like, here, oh, you're bipolar. Take this lithium. And it was just like, oh, damn, okay, you're going to give me lithium? And it was like no big deal to them. So I ended up going through 13 different antipsychotics, anticonvulsions, mood stabilizers, all those things, before I decided to cut it out cold turkey, because every single one of them made my life a living hell, because first of all, the side effects were ridiculous. But second of all, they were messing with my mental state more than anything I ever had. So I knew in my heart I wasn't bipolar. I knew that these drugs should be reserved for someone that truly is, but I knew in my gut I wasn't. So I went against, physician advice and just kind of, I did wean myself off. Okay, I didn't just cut myself off cold turkey, but I weaned myself off of all the bipolar medications. And they had stopped me taking the antidepressant because they thought I was bipolar. And when you're diagnosed bipolar, you don't take antidepressants because it's supposed to make the bipolar worse. So anyways, I had weaned myself off of all psychiatric medication, including anxiety pills, such as Klonopin and Xanax. And so I quit cold turkey. Everything was done. And it was the best decision I ever made. I started going to therapy more, because that was one thing that I didn't do enough of, was going to talk therapy. I did more of, okay, give me this pill, let's fix this quick. And that's really all my parents knew too, was oh, well, she's depressed, let's go get her the antidepressant or whatever. But talk therapy really changed my life, because during this period of time that I was not on any medication at all for mental illness, I relied on talk therapy, and it changed my life. And I first got a diagnosis of PTSD when I explained, everything that I had been through, and that was incorrect. I learned later on, because now I know a lot about the differences between PTSD and borderline, and because I wouldn't say that there was one precipitating a big T trauma event, or even a little t trauma event that would cause me to have specific to PTSD, but something like borderline is something that affects your very personality and how you relate to other people. And I understand myself so much more after realizing, okay, this makes sense. Out of everything that people have thrown at me, all these diagnoses, some of them accurate, that stemmed from the root cause, and some of the completely inaccurate, I'm like, yes, this makes sense. This makes sense as to why this and this and this happened. Why I had OCD. Why it was even questioned that possibly I was on the spectrum, of having autism. It was questioned because I had such a difficult time relating to other people, and I was so agitated so quickly, and I had these really, really intense, heavy mood swings, from intense rage to intense depression where I wanted to kill myself. It was like a roller coaster. And I will say that borderline, more than anything else, is a roller coaster. Absolutely a roller coaster. Because at least with bipolar disorder, it's a living hell. I mean, I salute anybody that lives with bipolar disorder and functions on a daily basis because I know it's hard. The difference between borderline and bipolar, I would say, is that bipolar, you're depressed for this amount of time, like a month, and then you go into a manic episode, and that manic episode lasts 2 weeks. So it's a longer period of time of staying manic and depressed. And I've definitely had manic episodes, but my manic episodes, which they were diagnosed by a doctor, but my manic episodes happen quick. I mean, it's from here to here to here to here to here to here to here. It's constant. So I knew, okay, this is not bipolar because I know that. I've educated myself to understand that bipolar and borderline are very different. Bipolar is a roller coaster as well, but it's a roller coaster where you stay a longer time on one episode and then you move on to the next. Whereas borderline, it's just constant up and down, up and down. And so all these things that precipitated me learning that I was borderline helped me learn more about myself. And identifying, I always had issues with interpersonal relationships. I mean, ever since I can remember, I would throw temper tantrums. Well, not just temper tantrums, but just like full on, just upset, like wailing fits before something great, like a birthday party or my friends were coming over to spend the night or something when I was a kid. Like, I'd get so upset, which is not normal for a kid. I mean, you're supposed to like that. So that's something that stumped my parents always. And I think that's the first time it was questioned, like, maybe she is on the spectrum, because being around other people disturbed me so much. Being around loud noise disturbed me so much. It was so upsetting to me and so overwhelming that I could not handle it. It was sensory overload. And I believe that's accurate. It definitely was sensory overload because that's something I still struggle with. I can't be around people that much without having those anxious feelings creep up again. It's gotten much better, but so and basically borderline is characterized by very turbulent relationships, and that's just my entire life experience. I mean, consistently every 2 years I transferred schools. From the time I was a little kid to the time I graduated high school, I transferred schools, and it happened to be every 2 years. And the reason was because I could not relate to other students, and I was being bullied really bad, but also I don't want to like blame everybody else. I mean, like, if all these places are bullying me and all these places, like, I'm having to leave and start over and start over and start over, like, there has to be something where I'm the common denominator. There has to be something within me that's making it difficult to relate to other kids. And I'm not blaming myself for my issues, but I'm just kind of recognizing them. Because, my part in that, I did have a part in that. Not something like I knew or could control, but I did have a part in causing the conflict. And I didn't even know it. I mean, I had conflict with everyone. I couldn't make friends, and I definitely couldn't keep them. If I did make a friend, it was going to get turbulent quick and move on to the next and do the same thing over again. And that just happened throughout my entire life. And same thing could be said about my family. I mean, I was extremely explosive randomly. I was impulsive too. Even as a kid, I was impulsive. And my parents did have a hard time understanding me. So, but I don't think that I really realized, like, okay, something like, I'm not just crazy, like, this is not completely my fault. I can't patronize myself for having these issues and these responses and these thought processes. But as I got older and I recognized, wow, okay, all these turbulent relationships that keep turning out the same, I'm the common denominator. That's not me blaming myself. I'm just taking responsibility for the fact that I know that whatever it is I struggle with is a contributing factor. So after going to therapy with my most recent therapist and explaining to her that I don't know what the hell, like, I try to form these relationships, whether it's friendships or a romantic relationship, and it always turns out the same. It becomes explosive and I can't control myself and all these things. And she's like, well, I mean, she ran through the 9 qualifying factors for borderline in the DSM, and I mean, I checked each box. And at first I was like, oh God, I don't like labels. I don't like you reading off a label to me or whatever. But it was pretty accurate because it describes my life as a whole. And I'm happy because I'm not looking for something to blame. I'm taking responsibility and I want to fix it. It's just I'm happy that I can look and see, oh my God, there's something I can do about this. Yeah, it's difficult to find borderline therapy because, like I said before, a lot of therapists aren't willing to take the time with borderlines to understand them or just aren't qualified to treat them. So it is difficult, but at least I know from my knowledge and I can research and learn about myself. There's something to go off of rather than what the hell is wrong with me. You know, I'm 23. I've had 22 jobs. I counted that yesterday because I just got my 22nd job. And I think that just shows that, yeah, okay, I have a knack for getting jobs. I've done a lot of different things in a lot of different areas, and that's good. But at the same time, to a lot of people, it shows inability to be consistent or a very unstable pattern. And I think it just goes right along with, I don't want to blame my disorder for it, but it makes a lot of sense to me because I'm like, why is it that wherever I go, no matter how hard I try to be self-aware and do the right thing and treat people with respect and control my emotions, which is the biggest, hardest part, I always end up having some sort of conflict or people misunderstand me and I end up leaving because I want to start over again where people will miraculously understand me or give me a chance. And it's just I always do the same thing no matter where I go, no matter what job I start, no matter what relationship I start. Yeah, I get that fresh start and it feels good. But at the end of it, it's like the same thing always happens. The same pattern that has been going on since I was 4 years old. You know? Self-sabotage. Inability to control the roller coaster. And it's exhausting. And I don't want to blame it on I don't want to blame anything, my actions on the disorder. I'm just saying that it makes sense. And I'm happy to know that there's an explanation for it, something that I can fix. But, I mean, today, the reason I decided to make this video is because my ex-husband, and yeah, I was married. I got married when I was 18. Cue very reckless, impulsive decisions that I've made, which I don't regret all of them, because a lot of them I have a lot of good memories with, and I'll carry the rest of my life, and it's like, okay, I lived a colorful life, you know what I mean? So it's not all bad, but it was reckless. So my ex-husband texted me today, and we're on good terms now. It's been a while, we're divorced, and he texted me that in a couple days his baby will be due with his current girlfriend. And it made me, first of all, it made me feel so good to know that he's in a place where he's happy and he has a family and he's finally stable, because when he was with me, he was so unstable, if not more than me. He had attempted suicide 3 times when we were together. And so seeing him this happy with a family and stable, and me and him being on good terms and understanding each other and respecting each other's lives, it feels so good. I mean, that makes me genuinely happy. It's just part of me sits here and I see everybody kind of moving on with their lives and moving forward and making progress. Rather than just starting over, you know, go to square one, start over, square one, start over, square one, start over, you know, build all this progress and then start over again, which is what I've been doing. They're making progress. Both my exes have made progress in their lives, and I'm sure my friends have too, and I feel like I'm stuck. I feel like I want to make progress too. It's just I do feel stuck and trapped in my own mind sometimes, because I have a very difficult time with relationships, and they become very tumultuous very quickly and easily without me even realizing it. Usually I realize that, and it's too late. I feel like I'm a very self-aware person, but I think part of the disorder is you're not aware of it while it's happening, which is the most tragic part, because it's like, well, man, if I had known what I know now, I could have stopped it, but I don't know if I could have. So, like, I feel like I'm kind of maybe fallen behind other people my age, um, because, it's difficult for me to have one stable job. It's difficult for me to complete college and even have the motivation to go back, or even the money, because I'm I have to work full time and I can barely, pay my bills as it is. How can I afford college on top of that? But trying to also treat myself for a mental illness at the same time is so difficult. And so I just feel stuck because I haven't really been able to stay at a job and move my way up and kind of mature into it and maybe be where I'm supposed to be. I've just kind of been, let's do this now, 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 just jumping around. And I haven't been able to form anything consistent. And over the past 7 months, I've made so many reckless decisions that it was my response to getting dumped by my ex, who I loved so much and still love so much, and I'm still heartbroken over it. And I tried very hard to be positive through that time, but it was very difficult, and I ended up giving in to my natural tendencies, which is self-destruction, self-sabotage, which basically is borderline personality disorder. So doing things that I knew would harm myself intentionally, like having reckless sex, and it ended up harming me. And I knew it would, and I still did it intentionally because I didn't care about myself and I kind of wanted to hurt myself. Um, Other things, like, I developed a drinking problem to numb out the emotional roller coaster, because the emotional roller coaster is so intense that you get so exhausted that you just want to feel nothing. And I was suicidal plenty of times because it's like I just want to stop. I just want to stop. Can someone just let me off now? One thing my most recent ex told me when he broke up with me was, he always referred to it as my roller coaster, my emotional roller coaster. And one thing he told me that I'll never forget is, well, Andy, I love you, but this is where I get off. So he got off the roller coaster. I'm still on it, alone. And I'm not really getting anywhere because the roller coaster just goes in circles, does the same thing over and over and over. I do feel like I've learned from it, so I will say that. But, he got off, he moved on with his life. I'm still stuck on it. I'm stuck. I don't really know where to go from here, except doing what I've been doing and working on self improvement. Like, you know what? Let's cut out drinking. Let's do something else. Like, still going to therapy, stuff like that. But it's just difficult to cope with, because I try to understand myself and be like, well, you know what? Like, I really try so hard to be how people want me to be and be normal, or whoever's idea of normal is, and think normal, and like, okay, well, what would a normal person do in this situation? How would a normal person maintain this friendship? Those are the things that I think, because I'm like, I don't know, like, I hate that I have this, because I just want to be able to have a friendship and not, like, worry about it and sabotage it. And I try and I try and I try to be aware of it, and I still fail at it. It still slips right between my fingers. It's like, okay, I gotta grasp on this. I'm not gonna let this happen again. I'm not gonna let this fall through my fingers. And then it does. Most recently, I resigned lost an opportunity. I was a police dispatcher, which I loved. Not necessarily the agency I worked for, department I worked for, but I loved dispatching. I've been dispatching for about 5 years, but at different places, obviously. I jump around when something doesn't, work out. So, but this most recent one I had been at for 7 months, and it was the first opportunity that changed my life because let's say financially, because financially it made me in a position where I didn't have to struggle as much, and I still live alone. I still just rely on myself. I don't rely on anybody else. But this opportunity made it so much easier for me to live comfortably, you know, and I let it slip out of my fingers because I let my emotions get away from me again. And I didn't even realize it was happening because I went into this opportunity telling myself, I even wrote myself a damn note saying, never lose sight. That's what I tell myself when I'm going into something that I really care about, is never lose sight of when you started this. Because once you lose sight, you get away from yourself. You get out of your own mind and into whatever this disorder has. Don't get away from yourself. And no matter how much I reminded myself and really made the effort not to let myself get away from my logical mindset, it did. I did have conflict with colleagues that it didn't end up well. Um, I do feel like people really didn't give me that much of a chance, but at the same time, like, I don't blame them. Like, once you kind of get snapped at, I understand retreating. And I understand why, like, I'm different, and and that might intimidate people as far as, like, wanting to have a friendship or relationship with me. But I ended up resigning from the opportunity because I want to be able to dispatch again, and I felt like I was sabotaging myself by staying, because I knew that if I stayed, they're gonna let me go, because my performance was even suffering from the amount of anxiety I was under, because I was overthinking everything and worrying about passing, so then I was making more mistakes. So I ended up self-sabotaging because of overthinking. I ended up causing conflict here and there. And in the end, I chose to resign because I wanted to be able to have the opportunity to go dispatch somewhere else one day and not have the termination on my record. So, and I'm just sitting here, and I know I made the right decision because, what else was I supposed to do? I tried everything. I knew it was at a point where I couldn't really come back from it. So I that was when I made my exit. But I lost a really good opportunity. I don't know if it was the right one for me, but I will say it was a good opportunity that could have gotten me out of the hole I'm kind of in, especially financially. I could have saved that money up and gone to even more therapy or something like that. Instead, for the past 7 months on this new, with all this new amount of pay I was receiving, I started spending it very recklessly, like where it became an addiction and it was out of control. And so now I'm at a point where I'm in between jobs again. I do have another job prospect, but it's nowhere near the pay of the last one, and I'm in a hole still because I spent all the money that I had. Even my stimulus check gone in a second. And I just feel like part of me feels stuck. And I'm not saying like, oh, I feel sorry for him, stuck, I know that, like, there's things that I need to do. Like, I need to go see my therapist. I need to take out one of the 3 self-help books that I bought specifically for borderline personality disorder. And I need to, really make more of an effort, but I just haven't had motivation. So I'm just kind of making this video to talk through my thoughts, because like I just feel like people don't understand it. I think that most people with borderline personality disorder suffer from extremely low self-esteem. Self-worth is a big one. Not feeling worthy and always seeking reassurance that you are worthy from other people, when in reality, as a healthy person, you need to seek that from within yourself and not within another person. But in the moment, it's hard to realize it when you're doing it. That's what I believe why the disorder is so complicated. Is it's like afterwards I can reflect and look back on it and I'm like, okay. But during it, it's like I'm not in that mindset. Like I said, it's just going into a whole different headspace. And so what I know about borderline is that the reason it's named borderline is because it's on the border of psychosis and neurosis, which is pretty accurate, because my experience with the psychosis side is the disassociating. I do a lot of disassociating now when I don't want to feel anything. And most of the times, yeah, sometimes I can disassociate, like, okay, and like consciously do it, but most of the times it's subconscious. Like I won't even realize I'm doing it until I like completely mess something up. And I think that's why I was like messing up so much when I was a police dispatcher, was because I was disassociating at work. So, and then the neurosis side, I feel like obviously I've explained the neurosis side already when it comes to like OCD and overthinking and self-sabotage. So it makes sense. But I just feel like borderline is the stigma within the stigma within the stigma within the stigma. And even a therapist has referred to me as a borderline. Oh, you're a borderline. And when I read on Quora, it's like, oh, borderline's this, borderline's that. And I'm okay with that. I don't take offense to that. But we are people too, and we are self-aware. Like there's a big difference. And even though they're very similar, because they're in the same class, they're both personality disorders. They are similar, but they're also really different. Narcissistic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder are very different. But they do kind of go hand in hand, because a lot of times those two people are usually attract each other and are together. But they're very different, because a narcissist is looking out for self-gratification and they think they're better than everybody else, whereas borderlines think that we're unworthy and we're just seeking that reassurance, and we're seeking the love that we never gave ourselves from somebody else, which is unhealthy. You can't seek it from somebody else. You have to get it from within, and I know that. I think the trademark thing of all borderlines, and it has always been true for me, is the chronic feeling of emptiness. And when I tell you that it's a physical feeling, it's a physical feeling. I used to tell my mom when I was a kid, like, I knew what it was. It was like, it feels like I'm thirsty. It feels like I need like 5 glasses of water. And that's still what it feels like. I still associate it with being thirsty. And it's that nauseating feeling like you need something and you don't have it. So borderlines are constantly seeking whatever it is they're missing, because they feel like they're missing a piece without other people's reassurance. So I just wanted to make this video because I wanted to talk through it. I wanted to give myself to talk through it, and like I wanted to maybe like put it out there from a borderline's perspective, because a doctor and a psychologist can talk about it all day, but I mean, this is me talking to you on 30 plus hours of not sleeping, and I'm probably in the middle of some sort of episode, so I just wanted to take an opportunity to talk about it. And I'm not saying, these are all my opinions. These are not facts. I'm not stating facts. I mean, I know a couple things about borderline from research, but anybody can do that research off Quora or anything. Quora is really helpful, I will say, because I can ask any question and all these people can answer, whether they've had it experience, whether they're a counselor, a therapist, a psychologist. Like, it is so cool. But anyways, I just wanted to talk about it. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me and watch my video. So yeah.